OSHA's 29 CFR 1910 Subpart Z establishes comprehensive standards for the control of exposure to toxic and hazardous substances in the workplace. The subpart includes permissible exposure limits, PELs, monitoring requirements, and health and safety procedures aimed at protecting workers from exposure to chemicals and substances that can pose acute or chronic health risks. Permissible exposure limits, PELs. PELs are established to limit workers' exposure to specific toxic substances, either as a time-weighted average, TWA, or as a short-term exposure limit, STEL. Exposure limits are often based on studies linking these substances to occupational diseases and health hazards. The subpart contains individual standards for numerous hazardous substances, including asbestos, lead, benzene, formaldehyde, cadmium, and others. Each substance standard includes requirements for exposure monitoring, medical surveillance, record keeping, and appropriate controls. Employers must monitor air quality and worker exposure levels regularly, especially for substances like asbestos, lead, and crystalline silica. Medical surveillance programs are required for workers who are exposed above the PEL, providing baseline and periodic health checks to detect potential adverse health effects early. Engineering controls such as local exhaust ventilation and substitution with less hazardous materials are prioritized to reduce exposure. Work practices like hygiene practices, housekeeping, and proper use of personal protective equipment, PPE, are also emphasized to minimize exposure. Employers must ensure that employees are informed and trained about the hazards of the substances they may encounter. Safety data sheets, SDSs, must be available, and proper labeling is required for all containers holding hazardous substances. Detailed records of exposure levels, monitoring results, and medical surveillance must be maintained as outlined in the standards for each substance. 29 CFR 1910 Subpart Z provides a comprehensive framework for controlling toxic and hazardous substances in the workplace. By establishing exposure limits, monitoring protocols, engineering controls, and training requirements, these regulations aim to safeguard workers from the harmful effects of exposure to hazardous chemicals and substances, thus ensuring a safer and healthier work environment.